Hello, this video is part of Lecture 4 for Interdisciplinary Sustainable Development. In this lecture, I'm going to briefly talk about managing business sustainability. Our agenda. For this session, we will be talking about managing business sustainability by looking at one interesting sustainable business case study. We will also take a look at one of the tools that we can use for managing business sustainability, which is life cycle assessment. You will apply life cycle assessment on a chosen product for your organization that you have chosen for your group project. And the company that I will talk about today is Interface Corporation. Interface Incorporation is a global flooring company specializing in carbon neutral carpet tile and resilient flooring, including luxury vinyl tile, LVT, and Nora rubber flooring. They help their customers create high-performance interior spaces that support well-being, productivity, and creativity, as well as the sustainability of the planet. They state, "Our mission, Climate Takeback, invites you to join us as we commit to operating in a way that is restorative to the planet and creates a climate fit for life." They offer products to a range of B2B and B2C, so business to business or organization to organization, and business to customer, organization to the end consumer like us. Their mission is to have no negative impact specifically on the environment, and their target was to be a sustainable business by 2020. So what have they done? Interface Incorporation began in 1973 under the name Carpet International, when founder Ray Anderson saw a carpet tile in Europe and recognized its future potential in modern offices. He introduced the concept to America and started a commercial flooring revolution that would spread around the world. Interface Incorporation is now the world's largest modular carpet manufacturer. Their mission was climbing Mount Sustainability. They set this as their objective, and you can see the sketch that one of the managers had drawn so the company could climb up Mount Sustainability and reach zero carbon footprint. They followed Mission Zero, and they wanted to have no negative social, environmental, or economic impact by the year 2020 and become a restorative business. They actually achieved their goal 1 year earlier in 2019, and they started a new program which they called Climate Takeback. If you would like to know more about their programs, I suggest you follow the link at the bottom of the slide and see what they do in their journey for Mission Zero, covering areas around sustainability and their new Climate Takeback initiative. In this slide, I very briefly talk about what they did and what they achieved as a company. They had lots of life cycle management initiatives. They undertook recycling, carbon offsetting, and they also undertook very good impact reporting. You can read more about the program that they had called the Re-Entry. As part of recycling with the modular carpet, once it had been used and reached the end of its useful life, they tried to recycle it and make other products with the modular carpet. With impact reporting, they participated in the Environmental Product Declaration. This presents transparent, verified, and comparable information about the life cycle environmental impact of different products. Companies can voluntarily disclose information about this and report the type of impact that their product has environmentally. On Blackboard, you can find the examples of 2 Environmental Product Declaration reports, EPDs, for 2 reports I have downloaded from the EPD website and uploaded. You can check these out and see how different organizations are also voluntarily undertaking this and providing information about the type of impact that their product has during its life cycle. We will learn more about this in today's lecture. As a result of these initiatives and other activities that they had, Interface Corporation reduced waste by 78% since 1994. They could reduce energy usage by 44%, and they diverted 100,000 tons of raw material from landfills. These saved $433 million in waste costs. They talk a lot about the kind of environmental impact that they had, both positive and reducing negative environmental impact by the company, as well as achieving their mission zero. Your task is to take a look and investigate what social and economic impact Interface Incorporation could also make as a result of these initiatives and programs. Okay, now if we want to manage sustainability in a business, we need to know about the footprint and the kind of impact that we have on the environment. In this slide and in the two upcoming slides, I would like to define some of the basic concepts that we need to know to be able to manage sustainability in our businesses. We talked about the concept of footprint in our previous session as well, and I introduced websites to you so that you can calculate your individual footprint. What do we mean by that? If you would like to have a good definition of that, a footprint sums up one or several types of environmental, social, or economic impacts for one predefined entity. This entity could be a particular product, it could be an individual. A bit like what we did last week, it could be a company, one particular company, or one product portfolio for our company, or we can see the footprint of different countries. This is again what we saw last week, and we can also have the global footprint of humanity. We should pay attention that when we talk about footprint, which type of impact we are talking about. In the footprints that we saw last week, we were mainly talking about ecological footprint. It was mainly about the amount of Earth's energy that someone or something uses. It was about the environmental footprint, so the effect that person, a company, an activity can have on the environment. For example, the amount of natural resources that they use and the amount of harmful gases that they produce, and so on. However, when we talk about footprint in our course, we would like to consider not only the environmental footprint, but also the social and economic impacts that one entity can have. Please pay attention to this. It is very important that we consider all three pillars of sustainability, so the triple bottom line. And when we talk about ecological footprint, we need to know about the biocapacity as well. So this is another useful definition that we need. Biocapacity is the planet's resource replenishing capacity. So when you use the websites, for example, the website for WWF, it actually gave you a comparison between the planet's resource replenishing capacity and the footprint that you have. When we calculate our footprint and we consider the Earth's biocapacity, we can define different degrees of sustainability, especially for businesses. In a situation where our resource usage exceeds the global resource reproduction rate, we can say that this situation is unsustainable. However, when both correspond exactly, the situation is called neutrally sustainable. But when we are in a stage or a situation that fewer resources are used up than are reproduced, then the situation is restorative or restoratively sustainable. This is the situation or the degree of sustainability that Interface claims they have reached and that they are a restorative business or a restoratively sustainable business. Another useful concept that we need to know to manage business sustainability is the definition and concept of impact. We define an impact as a negative or positive value created through business activity. We can have negative or positive impact, and impacts may be categorized as social, environmental, or economic. Again, we are paying attention to all three types of capital or three elements of sustainability. And we define a sustainable business as a business that has reached a neutral or even positive triple bottom line and sustained social, environmental, and economic capital in the long run. Now, to manage sustainability, we need to assess the impact that we have as a business on all three capitals on the triple bottom line. And we also need to see where we can improve, what we can do to improve our impact, to actually reduce the negative impact and increase the positive impact that we have. One of the tools that we can use to assess our impact is the product lifecycle assessment that I would like to introduce to you in the coming slides. So this tool is basically about a product life cycle, and it looks at the earliest stages of production when the product is produced, using, for example, raw materials or any other inputs, and then it goes to the consumption phase after production, and then after that we have the end of useful life stage. So we would like to assess the impact that a particular product can have at each of these stages. This is called life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis. In this slide, you see that we have environmental life cycle analysis, economic life cycle analysis or life cycle costing, and also social life cycle analysis. Traditionally, we only had environmental life cycle assessment, and this is where LCA as a tool comes from. It mainly focused on the product life cycle from raw materials through end of its useful life, and looked at the kind of environmental impact that this particular product had on the environment. Now, we would like to also consider the two other elements of the triple bottom line, economic and social impact. So the life cycle assessment that you need to do for your group project should also consider all three elements. In environmental LCA, we focus on the kind of impact that we have on water, for example. The amount of water that we use in producing that particular product, or the amount of wastewater or water pollution that it causes. Its impact on air quality, on biodiversity, and so on. In the economic LCA, we look at measures such as the amount of wages paid, economic value added, and profit made per life cycle stage. And in social life cycle assessment, we use more complex measurable indicators such as employee training, average hours of employee training that a company has per person, or the ratio of the basic salary and remuneration of women to men for each employee category by significant locations of operation. If you would like to know more about different indicators, different measures that are used for social life cycle assessment, you can take a look at the standards provided by GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, and you can see what the indicators, what measures can be used to assess and to have a social life cycle assessment for a company or for a particular product. Let's take a closer look at the most traditional life cycle assessment. This focuses mainly on the environmental impacts of a particular product in its life cycle. As I mentioned, life cycle analysis or assessment is a technique for assessing the environmental aspects and potential impacts associated with the product by undertaking these three steps. First, we compile an inventory of relevant inputs and outputs of a product system. Then, we evaluate the potential environmental impacts associated with those inputs and outputs. And finally, we interpret the results of the inventory analysis and impact assessment phases in relation to the objectives of the study. And LCA applies to services as well as products. So we can use it to assess the impact of a tangible good and also intangible services. It has been actually offered as a standard by ISO, Standardization Organization, and all the standards related to the ICA could be found under ISO 14040. Let's take a look at the history of economic life cycle analysis or assessment. The first studies of LCA are credited to Coca-Cola in 1969. They wanted to evaluate the impact of cans compared to the impact of glass bottles, and third parties undertook this analysis for Coca-Cola. Then, other companies started to take this approach in Europe and the United States as well. They wanted to see how much energy products were using. It was mainly related to the energy crisis and concerns that companies had in the 1970s. Because of that, they wanted to have a calculation of their LCAs. Then, in the 1980s, some companies that wanted to have environmental claims about their products tried to use LCA, and some of those companies tried to use it in advertising. They hired companies to do LCA research for them, which were called hired gun studies. The assumptions and methodologies that were used in those studies were not all the same and were not standardized, with most of them being very questionable. A lot of companies used those different LCAs that had been carried out with different assumptions and different methodologies in their advertising, and a lot of them were actually misleading customers. Because of that, 11 state attorney generals in the US recommended against using LCA for advertisement. And then there was a movement towards having uniform methodologies for doing LCA in the 1990s. Finally, the Society of Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry set up working groups, and ISO standards were probably the leading groups that started to have standard methodologies to undertake LCA analysis. If you would like to know more about this process and what happened, then you can take a look at this book that I've provided for you. Specifically, you can read section 35.2 of this book chapter, which explains more about LCA. Now let's take a look at the methodology itself, the standard methodology based on ISO 14040. The first stage in economic LCA analysis is thinking about the goal and scope of the analysis. Here, we need to specify our unit of analysis. What is it that we would like to focus on? What do we want to consider as our unit of analysis? Is it a product? Is it a portfolio of products? We need to have a very good definition of our unit of analysis and the boundaries that we have for that, our system boundaries. Then we need to consider which materials, processes, or products we would like to consider for our analysis. The type of goal is also very important. So do we want to take a snapshot of what's going on, or is our goal more change orientated? For example, would you like to see what we can change, or do we follow on both goals at the same time? So it is very important to have a clear goal and a scope for the analysis in the first stage. After we define our goal and scope, we need to undertake inventory analysis. An inventory analysis is about identifying and quantifying all the inflows and outflows of that particular unit of analysis. So all the energy inflows, material inflows, and the releases. This part is simple, as we just need to identify and list all the inputs and outputs. However, it is not easy, as it is very labor intensive. So we need to list all the processes and then all the inputs and outputs, and list all the materials that make up the product, upstream tracking and tracing. And we also need to list all the releases, all the outputs that we have at each stage of the product life cycle. When we have this simple but not necessarily easy inventory analysis, then we need to do an analysis of the impact of all elements within the inventory analysis. So in the impact assessment stage, we relate the inventory to impact that all those inputs and outputs have on the world. We describe the impacts of inventory analysis, and usually this is done in two steps. Firstly, we do classification, and secondly, characterization. The first step in classification is sorting the inventory parameters based on the type of environmental impact that they contribute to. And then, in the characterization step, we calculate the contribution of the emissions and resources for each type of environmental impact. For example, we calculate the global warming potential as an impact category. Finally, when we do impact analysis, after that we need to do interpretation. Interpretation is about understanding how much impact the assumptions and uncertainties had on the analysis, considering the limitations of the research and limitations of the analysis that we have done. So we have to interpret all different stages that we already have to get an overall understanding of how much impact our assumptions and uncertainties had on the analysis. Okay, we have just seen what steps are involved in environmental life cycle assessment in the production stage, in the use stage, and in the end of use stage. So what about the other two? What about the social and economic impacts at each stage? To understand these more, you will take part in an activity, and we will analyse the triple bottom line impacts of a t-shirt. This is the next activity that you need to undertake. I would like you to consider the 3 different stages of the life cycle of a t-shirt. When it is being manufactured from raw materials, then when it is actually being used by us, and then what happens to it after its useful life is finished at the end of user stage. So what happens to that t-shirt? I would like you to consider all the 3 impacts: social, environmental, and economic impacts we can have, both negative and positive impacts at each of these stages. We will then discuss this in more detail in our live session in the class. This is what I expect you to do as a life cycle analysis for your projects as well. So you need to pick up one particular product or one particular product type from your chosen organization and undertake a life cycle assessment for that. So consider different stages of the life cycle for that product, and also the 3 dimensions of the triple bottom line. In summary, we took a quick look at sustainability management in businesses as a process which involves impact accounting and impact management. In impact accounting, we assess the different amounts and different types of impacts that we have, and in impact management, we see where we can improve. What could be improved in terms of making more positive impact and reducing negative impacts. And as an outcome, we can have the triple bottom line: the ecological, social, and economic performance of an organization. By undertaking impact accounting and impact management, considering all the elements of the triple bottom line, we can move towards having a more sustainable business. However, we will only reach global sustainability if people lead sustainable lifestyles, businesses are managed sustainably, and nations are governed sustainably. We need all of these 3 elements. And if just one level does not make a commitment to sustainability, global sustainability will be impossible. If you have any questions, please post them on the discussion board on Blackboard. Thank you very much.